Hi, I'm Kaycee, and after 8 years of military service, 3 tours in Afghanistan, and earning medals that cost me everything including my best friend's life, my own family cornered me at Christmas dinner and demanded I hand over my purple heart and bronze star to my sister Jessica because she was getting married and wanted something meaningful for her wedding display. They said I was being selfish keeping them locked away, that Jessica deserved them more because she was starting a family. But what they didn't know was that I had recorded every guilt trip, every manipulation, every lie they told about my service. And when I finally played it back to them, the truth about who they really were burned their perfect family image to the ground. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning it all started, I was sitting in my small apartment in San Diego, still in my pajamas, coffee growing cold in my hands as I stared at the shadow box mounted on my living room wall. Inside, perfectly arranged against navy blue velvet, were the medals I'd earned during my time with the 101st Airborne Division. The Purple Heart gleamed softly in the morning light, its gold edges catching the sun that streamed through my blinds. Next to it sat my Bronze Star, the Combat Infantry Badge, and 3 other commendations that represented 8 years of my life I could never get back. I wasn't supposed to be awake this early on a Saturday, but the dreams had come again. Same ones that visited me most nights since I'd been back stateside. In them, I was back in that dusty compound outside Kandahar, and Chris was still alive, still cracking jokes about the terrible MREs and complaining about the heat. In the dreams, he never stepped on that IED. In the dreams, I never had to carry him to the medevac helicopter while his blood soaked through my uniform. The phone rang, jarring me back to my quiet apartment. Mom's name flashed across the screen, and I almost let it go to voicemail. Almost. But guilt has a way of making you pick up calls you know you shouldn't. "Kaycee, honey, how are you doing?" Her voice was that particular brand of cheerful that meant she wanted something. I'd learned to recognize it during my teenage years, and military service had only sharpened my ability to detect incoming artillery. "I'm fine, Mom. Just having coffee." I kept my voice neutral, non-committal. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Listen, I'm calling because Jessica has some exciting news, and we're having a big family dinner next weekend to celebrate. You know how much your sister loves having you there for important moments." I did know. Jessica had always been the golden child, the one who followed the script our parents had written for the perfect daughter. College at UC Davis, marketing degree, engagement to a nice boy from a good family. She'd never strayed from the path, never questioned whether the life laid out for her was actually what she wanted. Unlike me, who'd enlisted right out of high school instead of going to college, who'd chosen to serve my country rather than serve my family's expectations. "What's the news?" I asked, though I already suspected. "She's getting married. David finally proposed, and oh, Kaycee, you should see the ring. It's absolutely gorgeous. They're planning a spring wedding, and Jessica is so excited about all the details. She's been talking about wanting to make it really special, really meaningful." There it was, the setup. I could hear it in her voice, the way she emphasized meaningful like she was laying groundwork for something bigger. "That's great, Mom. I'm happy for her." "I knew you would be. You've always been such a good big sister, which is actually why I'm calling. Jessica has been thinking about ways to make the wedding more personal, more connected to family. She's been looking at different ideas for the reception, and she mentioned something that I thought was just beautiful." My stomach started to tighten. Experience had taught me that when Mom used words like beautiful and meaningful in the same conversation, someone was about to ask me for something I didn't want to give. She was thinking about having a display table at the reception. You know, photos of family members who've served, maybe some memorabilia. A way to honor service and sacrifice. Isn't that lovely? "It sounds nice," I said carefully. Well, that's where you come in, sweetheart. Jessica was hoping you might be willing to lend some of your medals for the display. Just for the wedding, of course. She knows how much they mean to you, but she thought it would be such a beautiful way to include your service in her special day. The words hit me like a physical blow. For a moment, I couldn't speak. I stared at the shadow box on my wall, at the medals that represented more than just military service. They represented every friend I'd lost. Every night I'd lain awake wondering if I'd make it home, every moment of terror and triumph that had shaped me into who I was. Mom, I know it's a big ask, honey, but Jessica has always looked up to you so much. She's so proud of your service, and she wants to share that pride with everyone at the wedding. David's family will be there, and you know how much it would mean to her to show them what a hero her big sister is. Hero. The word sat wrong in my mouth like sand. Heroes didn't come home when their friends didn't. Heroes didn't wake up screaming from nightmares 3 years after their last deployment. Heroes didn't spend their days working at a VA hospital, trying to help other broken soldiers piece their lives back together. I need to think about it, I said finally. Of course, sweetheart. I understand. But don't think too long, okay? The wedding is in 4 months, and Jessica is getting anxious about all the planning. You know how she gets when she's stressed. I did know. Jessica's stress had a way of becoming everyone else's problem. When she was overwhelmed, the whole family mobilized to fix whatever was bothering her. It had been that way since we were kids, when her tears could get me grounded for something I didn't do. I'll call her next week, I promised. That's my girl. I love you, Kaycee, and I'm so proud of you. We all are. The line went dead, and I sat in the sudden silence of my apartment, still holding the phone. Outside, San Diego was waking up. I could hear the distant sound of traffic, the neighbor's dog barking, the normal sounds of a world that kept spinning regardless of how I felt about it. I looked at the shadow box again, at the medals that had suddenly become the center of a family negotiation I'd never agreed to participate in. The Purple Heart stared back at me, its profile of George Washington stoic and unchanging. I'd earned it the day Chris died, when shrapnel from the same IED that killed him had torn through my shoulder and left me with scars that still ached when it rained. The Bronze Star was different. That one I'd earned 2 months later, when I led my squad through a firefight to evacuate wounded soldiers from a disabled vehicle. The citation talked about valor and heroism, but all I remembered was the taste of dust and fear, the weight of responsibility for the lives in my hands. These weren't decorations. They weren't props for a wedding display. They were pieces of my soul, forged in places most people would never understand, paid for with prices most people would never be asked to pay. I stood up and walked to the kitchen, poured the cold coffee down the sink, and started fresh. The routine gave me something to do with my hands while my mind processed what had just happened. My family wanted to borrow my medals like they were costume jewelry, like they were something pretty to put on a table next to the centerpieces and wedding favors. The worst part was that I could already see how this would play out. Jessica would call, all sweetness and excitement, talking about how meaningful it would be to have them at her wedding. Mom would follow up with gentle pressure disguised as concern for Jessica's feelings. Dad would probably chime in with something about family unity and doing things for the people we love. And if I said no? If I told them that these medals weren't for display, that they represented things too private and too painful to put on exhibition, then I'd be the selfish one, the difficult one, the sister who couldn't do one simple thing for Jessica's special day. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. My phone buzzed with a text message. Jessica's name appeared on the screen, and I knew the campaign had already begun. OMG, Kaycee. Did Mom tell you about the wedding? I'm so excited, and I can't wait to talk to you about the display idea. Call me when you get a chance. Love you, sis. 3 exclamation points and a heart emoji. That was Jessica's style. All enthusiasm and energy. Like the whole world was just waiting to celebrate whatever she was excited about. I could picture her now, probably at her apartment in Riverside, planning her perfect wedding with military precision that would have impressed my drill sergeants. I didn't text back. Not yet. Instead, I walked to my bedroom and pulled out the box I kept in my closet, the one with all the other pieces of my military service that didn't fit in the shadow box. Letters from my squad, photos from deployments, the flag from Chris's funeral that his parents had given me because they said I was the closest thing to family he'd had over there. At the bottom of the box was a journal I'd kept during my last deployment, the one where I'd written about the day Chris died. I'd never shown it to anyone, never even read it myself since I'd written it. But now I pulled it out and opened it. To that page, my handwriting shaky from the adrenaline and grief I'd been carrying. Chris stepped on the IED at 6:30 hours. I was maybe 10 feet behind him, far enough away that I didn't get the worst of it, close enough that I caught shrapnel in my shoulder and leg. The explosion was so loud it left my ears ringing for hours. When the dust settled, I could see he was hurt bad. Real bad. I dragged him to cover and called for medevac, but I knew. You always know. He was conscious for maybe 2 minutes after. I got to him. Long enough to tell me to make sure his mom knew he wasn't scared. Long enough to make me promise I'd live a good life for both of us. He died before the helicopter got there, and I held his hand until they loaded him up. The medic said the shrapnel that hit me came from the same device that killed him. Same blast, same moment. But I got to come home, and he didn't. How do you make sense of that? How do you explain to someone's mother that her son died 3 feet away from you, and you lived because of pure chance? The Purple Heart they're going to give me has Chris's blood on it. Maybe not literally, but it's there. Every time I look at it, I'll remember that I'm wearing a medal for surviving something that killed my best friend. I closed the journal and put it back in the box. My hands were shaking, the way they always did when I read those words. 3 years later, and it still felt like it had happened yesterday. This was what my family wanted to put on display at a wedding. This was what they thought would make a nice decoration next to the cake and flowers. They had no idea what they were asking for, no understanding of what those medals represented. My phone rang again. This time it was Jessica, and I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. Kaycee, oh my God, I'm so glad you picked up. Did Mom tell you about the wedding? I'm literally dying to talk to you about everything. Congratulations, Jess. I'm happy for you and David. Thank you. I'm so excited I can barely think straight. We've been talking about this for months, and now that it's official, I just want to plan everything perfectly. Which is actually why I wanted to talk to you. Here it comes, I thought. Mom mentioned the display idea to you, right? I know it might seem like a weird request, but I've been thinking about it for weeks. I want the wedding to be meaningful. You know? Not just pretty flowers and a nice dress, but something that really represents our family and what we've been through. What we've been through? The words came out sharper than I'd intended. Well, yeah. I mean, your service has been such a big part of our family's story. All those years you were deployed, all of us worrying about you, praying you'd come home. Safe. It affected all of us, you know? And now that you're home, I want to celebrate that. I want to show everyone how proud we are of you. I sat down hard on my couch, processing what she'd just said. Somehow, in Jessica's mind, my military service had become a family experience, something they'd all participated in by worrying about me. She was talking about my medals like they were family heirlooms, like they belonged to all of us instead of just me. Jessica, I need you to understand something. Those medals aren't just decorations. They represent specific things that happened to me, things that were really difficult and personal. Oh, I know that. That's what makes them so special. That's why having them at the wedding would be so meaningful. Everyone would see them and know that our family has been through something important, something bigger than just normal family stuff. normal family stuff. Like my 3 tours in Afghanistan were just another family milestone, like graduating from college or getting a promotion at work. I don't think you understand what I'm trying to say. Of course I do. I'm not asking to keep them forever or anything. Just for the wedding, and I promise I'll take super good care of them. I'll put them in a beautiful display case, maybe with some photos of you in uniform. It'll be like a tribute. A tribute. To what? To my service? To the friends I'd lost? To the nightmares I still carried? Jessica was talking about turning the worst and best moments of my life into a centerpiece for her wedding reception. I need to think about it, I said again. But there's not much time. I mean, I guess there's time, but I'm trying to get all the details sorted out so I can focus on the dress and flowers and all the fun stuff. Please, Kaycee? It would mean so much to me. And to Mom and Dad, too. They're so proud of you, and they want everyone to know what you've accomplished. What I'd accomplished. Like earning a Purple Heart was an achievement instead of a consequence. Like getting a Bronze Star was a goal instead of a moment when I'd done what I had to do to keep my soldiers alive. I'll call you back, I said. I promise. Just give me a few days to think. Okay, but not too long, okay? I love you, Kaycee, and I'm so grateful to have a sister like you. The line went dead, and I sat in the silence of my apartment, staring at the shadow box on the wall. The medals looked different now somehow, like they were already gone, already transformed from private symbols of my service into public decorations for someone else's celebration. I thought about Chris, about the promise I'd made to him in those last minutes before he died. Live a good life for both of us, he'd said. But what did that mean? Did it mean giving up pieces of myself to make my family happy? Did it mean pretending that my service was something that belonged to all of them instead of just me? I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Marcus's number. He'd been my squad leader during my first deployment, and he'd stayed in touch after he'd gotten out 2 years before me. If anyone would understand what I was feeling, it would be him. Kaycee, hey girl, how are you doing? I'm okay. Well, actually, I'm not okay. I need to talk to someone who gets it. What's going on? I told him everything. The phone call from Mom, the conversation with Jessica, the way they were talking about my medals like they were family property. Marcus listened without interrupting. And when I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Jesus, Kaycee. I'm sorry. That's messed up. Am I being selfish? I mean, it's just for one day, and it's my sister's wedding. Maybe I should just do it. No. His voice was firm. Those medals are yours. You earned them. You bled for them. You watched friends die for them. Nobody else gets to decide what to do with them. Not even family. But they're saying it's about honoring my service, about showing pride in what I've done. That's bullshit, and you know it. If they wanted to honor your service, they'd ask you what you wanted, not tell you what they need from you. This isn't about you, Kaycee. This is about them wanting to feel important by association. His words hit me like a punch to the gut because I knew he was right. This wasn't about honoring my service. This was about Jessica wanting her wedding to be special, about my parents wanting to show off their military daughter, about everyone else's needs except mine. What should I do? You should tell them no, and you should tell them why. They need to understand that your service isn't a prop for their family drama. And if they don't accept that, then you'll know where you really stand with them. Look, I know it's hard. Family stuff always is. But you can't let them take pieces of your soul and put them on display just because they're related to you. We talked for another hour, and by the time I hung up, I felt clearer about what I needed to do. I wasn't going to let my family turn my medals into wedding decorations. I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story of my service to fit their narrative of family pride and sacrifice. But first, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I needed to know if this was just Jessica being thoughtless, or if there was something deeper going on. So I decided to do something I'd never done before. I was going to record my conversations with my family, document exactly what they said and how they said it. I downloaded a call recording app and set it up on my phone. Not because I planned to use the recordings against them, but because I wanted to be sure I wasn't misremembering or misunderstanding their words. I wanted to have proof for myself of what was really being said. The next morning, I called my mom back. "Kaycee, I'm so glad you called. Have you thought about Jessica's request?" "I have, and I need to talk to you about it." "Mom, these medals aren't just decorations. They represent some of the most difficult experiences of my life." "Oh, sweetheart, I know that. We all know how hard your service was. That's what makes them so special, so meaningful for the wedding. But that's exactly why I don't want them on display. The Purple Heart I earned the day my best friend was killed by an IED. Every time I look at it, I think about holding his hand while he died." "Is that really what you want people to think about at Jessica's wedding?" There was a pause, and when Mom spoke again, her voice had a different tone, less sweet, more impatient. "Kaycee, I understand that your service was difficult, but you can't hold on to these things forever like they're too precious for anyone else to appreciate. Jessica is your sister. She loves you and she wants to honor you. Why can't you see that? I'm not holding on to them like they're too precious. I'm keeping them because they're mine. They're part of my story, not the family's story. But you are part of this family. What affects you affects all of us. We all sacrificed while you were gone. Do you think it was easy for us, worrying about you every day? Do you think we didn't serve too, in our own way?" There it was. The thing I'd been afraid to hear but had suspected all along. In my mother's mind, my family had served alongside me. My deployments had been a family sacrifice. My medals were family achievements, and my trauma was family property. "Mom, I need you to listen to me. You didn't serve. You worried, and I'm grateful for that. But you didn't serve. You weren't in combat. You didn't watch people die. You didn't earn these medals. Kaycee Ann, I don't like your tone. We're trying to do something nice for Jessica. Something that honors you and your service. I don't understand why you're being so difficult about this." Difficult. The word my family had always used when I didn't do what they wanted. When I'd enlisted instead of going to college like they'd planned, I was being difficult. When I'd re-enlisted for a second tour instead of coming home, I was being difficult. And now, when I wanted to keep my own medals, I was being difficult again. I'm not being difficult. I'm being honest. These medals aren't for display. They're private, personal things that I earned through experiences I don't want to share with a room full of wedding guests. Well, I think you're being selfish. Jessica has never asked you for anything, and the one time she does, you're acting like she's trying to steal from you. These medals are just sitting in your apartment where nobody can see them. At least at the wedding, they'd be appreciated. Just sitting in my apartment, like they were wasted on me, like they needed to be seen by other people to have value. I felt something cold and sharp settle in my chest, the same feeling I'd had in combat when I'd realized that a situation was more dangerous than I'd initially thought. "Mom, I'm going to say this one more time. I'm not lending my medals for Jessica's wedding. They're not decorations, and they're not family heirlooms. They're mine." "Fine, but don't expect me to explain to your sister why her own sister won't. Do one simple thing to make her wedding special. Don't expect me to make excuses for your selfishness." She hung up, and I sat staring at my phone, the recording app still running. I stopped it and played it back, listening to my mother's voice as she dismissed my service, my sacrifice, my right to decide what happened to my own possessions. This was bigger than just wedding decorations. This was about my family's fundamental inability to see me as separate from them, to understand that my military service belonged to me and not to them. They'd spent years claiming ownership of my experiences, and now they wanted physical proof of that ownership to display at a wedding. But I had something they didn't know about. I had their own words, recorded and preserved, showing exactly how they really felt about me and my service. And I was just getting started. The week after my conversation with Mom, I threw myself into work at the VA hospital with an intensity that surprised even me. I'd been working there for 2 years as a patient advocate, helping other veterans navigate the maze of benefits and services, but suddenly every case felt personal. Every soldier who walked through those doors carrying invisible wounds reminded me of myself, and every family member who didn't understand why their veteran couldn't just get over it reminded me of my own family. Tuesday morning brought Mrs. Chen into my office, clutching a stack of papers and looking exhausted. Her son Tommy had been back from Iraq for 6 months, and she was trying to understand why he wouldn't talk to anyone, why he stayed in his room all day, why he'd thrown away his medals after she'd suggested displaying them in the living room. "I just want to be proud of him," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I want people to know what he did over there. But he acts like I'm asking him to do something terrible." I handed her tissues and sat down across from her, seeing my own mother in her worried face. "Mrs. Chen, can I ask you something? When Tommy threw away his medals, what did he say?" "He said they weren't mine to be proud of. He said I didn't earn them." She looked up at me with confused eyes. "But I'm his mother. Doesn't that count for something?" I thought about my conversation with Mom, about her insistence that the family had served to by worrying about me. "It counts for a lot. Your love and support mean everything to him, but the medals themselves, they represent specific moments in his life that were probably very difficult. Sometimes keeping them private is the only way to process what they mean." "I don't understand. If he did something heroic, why wouldn't he want people to know?" "Because maybe it didn't feel heroic to him. Maybe it felt like survival, or duty, or just doing what he had to do. And maybe sharing that with people who weren't there feels like having to explain something that can't be explained." Mrs. Chen nodded slowly, and I could see understanding beginning to dawn in her eyes. We talked for another hour, and by the time she left, she seemed more at peace with letting Tommy keep his service to himself. After she was gone, I sat in my office staring out the window at the parking lot where veterans came and went throughout the day. Some walked with visible injuries, others carried invisible ones. All of them had stories that belonged to them, experiences that had shaped them in ways their families would never fully understand. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Hey sis, Mom said you're still thinking about the medal thing. I really hope you'll reconsider. The wedding planner needs to know about the display by Friday so she can design the table. Love you." Still thinking about it. Like I was being indecisive instead of protective. Like I was taking too long to make an obvious choice instead of wrestling with something that cut to the core of who I was. I looked at my phone and realized I'd been dreading this conversation, but it was time to have it. I called Jessica back, making sure my recording app was running. "Kaycee, I was just thinking about you. Did you get my text?" "I did. Jessica, I need to talk to you about the medals. I've made my decision." "Oh, good. I was hoping you'd come around. I know Mom was worried that you were having second thoughts, but I told her you'd understand how important this is." "I do understand how important it is. That's why I can't lend them to you." Silence on the other end of the line. Then Jessica's voice, smaller and more uncertain. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm not comfortable having my medals displayed at your wedding. They're too personal, too connected to difficult experiences. I hope you can understand that." "But Kaycee, I'm not asking you to give them to me forever. Just for one day. Just for the wedding. I promise I'll take perfect care of them." "It's not about taking care of them. It's about what they represent." Jessica, the Purple Heart. I earned the day my friend Chris was killed. The Bronze Star came from a firefight, where I had to make decisions that I still have nightmares about. These aren't just awards. They're connected to the worst and most intense moments of my life. I know that. That's what makes them so meaningful. That's why I want them at the wedding. To show everyone what you've been through, what our family has been through. There it was again. What our family has been through. Like my deployments had been a group activity, like my combat experiences were family memories. Jessica, our family didn't go through combat. I did. You worried about me, and I'm grateful for that. But you weren't there. You didn't see what I saw or do what I had to do. I know I wasn't there physically, but I was there emotionally. Do you know what it was like for me, having my big sister deployed in a war zone? Do you know how many nights I stayed awake wondering if you were okay? How many times I checked the news and felt sick thinking about what might be happening to you? I could hear the tears in her voice, and part of me wanted to comfort her, to apologize for putting her through that worry. But a bigger part of me was angry. She was making my service about her feelings, her experience, her sacrifice. I'm sorry that was hard for you. I really am. But that doesn't make my medals yours to use. I'm not trying to use them. I'm trying to honor them. I want people to see what you've accomplished, what you've survived. I want them to understand that you're a hero. I don't want to be anyone's hero at your wedding, Jessica. I want to be your sister, supporting you on your big day, but I want to do that without having to put my trauma on display. Your trauma? Her voice was getting sharper now, less tearful and more frustrated. Kaycee, you act like your service is this terrible thing that happened to you, but it's not. It's something you chose. It's something you should be proud of. I am proud of it, but I'm also protective of it, and I have the right to keep it private. You have the right, sure, but don't you think you have a responsibility too? To your family? To the people who love you and want to celebrate you? Responsibility. The word hit me like a slap. I'd spent 8 years taking responsibility for my soldiers, for my missions, for decisions that kept people alive or got them killed. I'd taken responsibility for coming home when Chris didn't, for carrying his memory and his family's grief. And now my sister was telling me I had a responsibility to turn my service into a wedding decoration. My responsibility is to take care of myself and honor the memory of the people who didn't make it home. Not to provide props for your wedding. Props? Jessica's voice was cold now. Is that what you think this is? You think I want to use your medals as props? I think you want something that doesn't belong to you, and you're trying to make me feel guilty for saying no. They're just sitting in your apartment, Kaycee. Just sitting there where nobody can see them. What's the point of having them if you're going to hide them away like you're ashamed of them? Just sitting there. The same phrase Mom had used. Like medals had to be seen by other people to have value. Like my private relationship with my own service wasn't enough. I'm not ashamed of them. I'm protective of them. There's a difference. Well, your protection is starting to look a lot like selfishness. I'm asking for one day, Kaycee. One day to honor you and celebrate what you've done. And you're acting like I'm asking you to give me a kidney. If you wanted to honor me, you'd respect my no. If you wanted to celebrate what I've done, you'd ask me what I'm comfortable with instead of telling me what you need from me. Fine. You know what? Fine. I'll figure out something else for the display. But don't expect me to pretend I'm not disappointed. And don't expect me to explain to everyone why my war hero sister couldn't be bothered to help make my wedding special. She hung up, and I sat in my office staring at my phone. War hero sister. Like that was my primary identity in her mind. Like everything else about me was secondary to my military service. But only when it was convenient for her, only when it could be used to make her feel important. I played back the recording, listening to the conversation again. What struck me most was how quickly Jessica had gone from sweet and pleading to cold and manipulative. How easily she'd shifted from honoring my service to questioning my character. It was like watching someone take off a mask, revealing what they really thought underneath. That evening, I drove to the VFW hall where I sometimes volunteered. It was bingo night, and the place was full of older veterans and their spouses, laughing and calling out numbers with the kind of easy camaraderie that only came from shared understanding. I wasn't there to play bingo, though. I was there to talk to Frank. Frank was a Vietnam veteran who'd become something of a mentor to me when I'd first started coming to the VFW. He was in his 70s now, but he still had the bearing of the Marine he'd been 50 years ago. He'd been the one to explain to me why some days were harder than others, why crowds sometimes made me nervous, why I felt more comfortable around other veterans than around my own family. I found him at his usual table in the corner, nursing a beer and watching the bingo game with amused detachment. He looked up when I approached, and his weathered face broke into a smile. "Kaycee, good to see you, kid. You look like you've got something on your mind." I sat down across from him and told him everything. The phone calls, the pressure, the way my family was treating my medals like community property. Frank listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grimacing, at particularly painful parts of the story. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, turning his beer bottle slowly between his hands. Finally, he looked up at me with eyes that had seen too much. "You know what this reminds me of? When I came back from Vietnam, my family wanted me to be their hero too. They wanted me to tell stories about what I'd done over there, show off my medals, be proud of my service. But they only wanted the sanitized version. They wanted the heroic narrative without the reality. What did you do?" I tried to give them what they wanted for a while, told them the stories they could handle, let them display my medals in the living room, played the role of the returning hero, but it ate at me, you know? Having to perform my own service for people who'd never understand what it really meant. How did it end? Badly. I started drinking too much, got angry all the time. My marriage fell apart, and I stopped talking to my family for about 10 years. It wasn't until I found other veterans who understood that I started to heal. Frank took a long sip of his beer and looked at me seriously. "Here's what I learned, kid. Your service belongs to you. The good parts, the bad parts, the parts you're proud of, and the parts that keep you up at night. All of it. And you get to decide what to do with it, who to share it with, and how to honor it." But their family, doesn't that count for something? Family that respects you counts for everything. Family that wants to use you counts for nothing. And right now, yours is sounding more like the second kind. I stayed at the VFW for another hour, talking with Frank and some of the other veterans about family dynamics and the weight of expectations. Every one of them had a story about relatives who wanted to claim ownership of their service, who thought love gave them the right to make decisions about things they'd never understand. When I finally left, I felt clearer about what I was dealing with. This wasn't about wedding decorations or family pride. This was about boundaries, about my right to control my own narrative, about the difference between being loved and being used. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 12 text messages. My phone had been on silent, but the sheer volume of notifications told me that the family drama had escalated overnight. The first text was from Jessica, sent at 2:47 a.m. "I can't believe you're being so stubborn about this. I talked to Mom and she's really upset. This isn't just about me anymore." The second was from Mom, sent at 6:15 a.m. "Kaycee, I need you to call me immediately. This situation with Jessica is getting out of hand." The third was from Dad, sent at 7:30 a.m. "Your mother is beside herself. Call home and fix this." The fourth was from Aunt Sarah, sent at 8 a.m. "I don't know what's going on with you and Jessica, but your mother called me crying. Whatever this is about, you need to work it out." The pattern continued through the rest of the messages. Jessica had called in reinforcements, mobilized the entire family to put pressure on me. It was a coordinated campaign designed to make me feel isolated and guilty, to convince me that my refusal to loan my medals was hurting everyone. I made coffee and sat down at my kitchen table, looking at the shadow box on my wall. The medals looked the same as always, but now they felt like the center of a storm I'd never wanted to be part of. My family had turned my service into a battlefield, and I was the only one fighting for my own side. I called Mom back, making sure to record the conversation. "Kaycee, thank God. I've been worried sick about you. Jessica is devastated. Absolutely devastated." She spent half the night crying about how her own sister won't help her with her wedding. "Mom, I'm not trying to hurt Jessica. I'm just not comfortable lending my medals." "But why?" "I still don't understand why. They're just sitting there in your apartment, and Jessica wants to honor them. She wants to honor you. What's wrong with that?" "What's wrong with it is that you're all acting like these medals belong to the family instead of just me. Like my service was something we all participated in." "We did participate in it. Do you think it was easy for us when you were gone? Do you think we didn't sacrifice anything? Your father and I aged 10 years every time you deployed." Jessica worried herself sick about you. "We all did our part. Your part was supporting me, and I'm grateful for that. But your part wasn't earning these medals. Your part wasn't being in combat. Your part wasn't watching friends die." "Oh, for heaven's sake, Kaycee. You're being so dramatic. It's not like Jessica is asking you to relive your combat experiences. She's asking you to let people see what you've accomplished." Dramatic, another word from the family vocabulary of dismissal. When I'd had nightmares after coming home, I was being dramatic. When I'd needed space to process my experiences, I was being dramatic. And now, when I wanted to keep my medals private, I was being dramatic again. "Mom, I need you to understand something. These medals aren't accomplishments. They're consequences. The Purple Heart means I was wounded in combat. The Bronze Star means I was in a situation where people were trying to kill me and my soldiers. These aren't things I accomplished. They're things that happened to me. Well, regardless of what they mean to you, they mean something to your family too. They represent the pride we feel in your service, the sacrifice we all made while you were gone. You didn't make the sacrifice. You experienced the worry and fear that comes with having a family member in combat. That's not the same thing as sacrifice." "Kaycee Ann, I don't like what you're implying. Are you saying that your family's feelings don't matter? Are you saying that our love and support for you doesn't count?" "I'm saying that your love and support doesn't give you ownership of my service. I'm saying that caring about me doesn't make my medals yours to use." "Use? Nobody's using anything. Jessica wants to display them for one day, at her wedding, to honor you. How is that using them?" "Because she's not asking me how I want to be honored. She's telling me what she needs from me to make her wedding special. There's a difference. You know what? I think you've been spending too much time with those other veterans at that VFW place. They're filling your head with ideas about being a victim, about your family being the enemy. That's not healthy, Kaycee." The VFW place. She said it like it was a cult instead of a community center where veterans supported each other. Like talking to people who understood my experiences was somehow corrupting me. The people at the VFW understand what I've been through. They understand why these medals are important to me. More important than your family? More important than your sister's happiness? Important in a different way. Personal in a way that can't be shared. Well, I think you're making a mistake. I think you're choosing strangers over your own family, and I think you're going to regret it when Jessica's wedding comes and goes, and you realize you could have been part of something beautiful instead of sitting alone in your apartment with your precious medals. The words hit me like a physical blow. Sitting alone in your apartment with your precious medals. Like my private relationship with my own service was pathetic, like my need for boundaries was selfish isolation. Mom, I'm going to say this one more time. I'm not lending my medals for Jessica's wedding. That's my final decision. Fine, but don't expect me to clean up the mess you're making with your family. Don't expect me to explain to people why you're being so selfish. She hung up, and I sat in the silence of my kitchen, staring at the phone. The recording app was still running, capturing the silence that followed her words. I stopped it and saved the file, adding it to the growing collection of evidence that my family saw me as a resource to be used rather than a person to be respected. That afternoon, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of just defending my position, I was going to go on the offensive. I was going to make my family confront the reality of what they were asking for. I drove to the storage unit, where I kept some of my military gear, and pulled out a box I hadn't opened in months. Inside were photos from my deployments, letters from my soldiers, and a DVD that Chris's parents had sent me after his funeral. It was a compilation of videos he'd made during our last deployment, little clips he'd recorded to send home to his family. I'd only watched it once, right after they'd sent it to me. It was too painful, too raw, too much like having him back, for a few minutes only to lose him again. But now I needed it. I needed to remind myself of who Chris was, of what we'd been through together, of why my medals meant more than wedding decorations. Back at my apartment, I put the DVD in my laptop and pressed play. Chris's face filled the screen, grinning, at the camera with that lopsided smile that had made him popular with everyone in our unit. He was wearing his combat gear, sitting in the back of a Humvee, and the video was shaky from the vehicle's movement. "Hey, Mom. Hey, Dad. It's me. Just wanted to let you know I'm okay. We're heading out on a patrol right now, and Sergeant Cross here is making sure we're all squared away." The camera swung around to show me checking equipment, and I could hear Chris's voice continuing off camera. "She's the best NCO I've ever worked with. Takes care of all of us like we're her little brothers." I paused the video, staring at my younger self on the screen. I looked different then, harder somehow, more focused. The person in that video didn't know that in 2 weeks, she'd be holding Chris's hand while he died. She didn't know that she'd spend the next 3 years carrying his last words, his final moments, his family's grief. I skipped ahead to another video, this one recorded just a few days before the IED attack. Chris was in our small forward operating base, sitting on his bunk and talking quietly to the camera. "I've been thinking about home a lot lately, about what I want to do when I get back. I think I want to be a teacher, maybe work with kids who need someone to believe in them. Sergeant Cross says I'm good at explaining things, at making people feel like they can do hard stuff." He looked directly into the camera, his expression serious. "If something happens to me over here, I want people to know that I wasn't scared. I mean, I was scared, but I wasn't afraid. Does that make sense? I was scared of dying, but I wasn't afraid to do my job. I wasn't afraid to take care of my brothers and sisters." I closed the laptop, unable to watch anymore. This was what my family wanted to put on display. Not just my medals, but the memory of Chris, the weight of his death, the responsibility I carried for surviving when he didn't. They wanted to turn all of that into a centerpiece for a wedding reception. That evening, I sat down and wrote a letter. Not to my family, but to Chris's parents. I told them about my family's request, about the pressure I was feeling to display my medals. I told them about the Purple Heart, about how it connected me to their son, about how it represented the moment I'd lost him. I didn't send the letter. I just needed to write it, to put into words what the medals really meant to me. They weren't symbols of heroism or achievement. They were reminders of loss, of responsibility, of the price of service that couldn't be explained to people who hadn't paid it. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was Jessica again, and this time she sounded different. Less angry, more desperate. "Kaycee, please, I need you to listen to me. I talked to David and he helped me understand some things. I know I've been pushy about the medals, but I want you to know that I'm not trying to hurt you. I started my recording app and answered carefully. I'm listening. I think maybe I didn't understand what the medals meant to you. I was thinking about them like they were awards, like trophies. But David helped me see that they might be more complicated than that. David was Jessica's fiancé, a kind man who'd served briefly in the National Guard. He'd never been deployed, but he'd been through basic training and understood military culture better than the rest of my family. They are more complicated than that, I said. I know, and I'm sorry for pushing so hard. But Kaycee, I need you to understand something too. This wedding isn't just about me. It's about our family, coming together, about celebrating love and commitment. And you're such an important part of that. I want to be part of your wedding, Jessica. I want to celebrate with you and support you. But I want to do that as your sister, not as your military trophy. I don't think of you as a trophy. I think of you as a hero. I think of you as someone who did something incredible, something that most people could never do, and I want people to know that about you. But what if I don't want them to know? What if I want to keep that part of my life private? I guess I don't understand why you would want that. If I had done something as brave as what you did, I'd want everyone to know. If you had done what I did, you might feel differently about it. Jessica, some experiences are too personal to share. Some parts of our lives need to stay private, even from family. But we're sisters. We're supposed to share everything. We're supposed to love each other and respect each other's boundaries. That's different from sharing everything. There was a long pause, and when Jessica spoke again, her voice was smaller, more vulnerable. I feel like I'm losing you. Ever since you came back from your last deployment, you've been different, more distant, like you're keeping parts of yourself away from us. I am keeping parts of myself away from you, the parts that are too dark, too painful, too complicated to explain. I'm doing that to protect you and to protect myself. But I want to understand. I want to know what you went through so I can help you process it. You can't understand, Jessica. You weren't there, and that's not your fault, but it's the reality. Some things can't be shared, even with people who love us. So what am I supposed to do? Just accept that my sister is a stranger now? Just pretend that your service didn't change everything? You're supposed to love me anyway. You're supposed to respect that I'm different now without demanding that I explain how or why. You're supposed to let me keep some things private without taking it personally. I don't know how to do that. You start by accepting my no about the medals. You start by understanding that some things are too important to me to share, even with you. Jessica was quiet for a long moment, and I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with tears. Okay, I accept your no about the medals, but I need you to accept that I don't understand it and that it hurts my feelings. I can't accept that, and I'm sorry it hurts your feelings. That's not what I want. I know. I love you, Kaycee. Even when I don't understand you, I love you too. We hung up, and I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that Jessica had finally accepted my decision. Sadness that it had taken so much conflict to get there. But as I played back the recording, I realized that something was still bothering me. Jessica had accepted my no, but she'd done it in a way that made me feel guilty for setting boundaries. She'd made it clear that my privacy was hurting her feelings, that my need for boundaries was causing her pain. It was a subtle form of manipulation, more gentle than the outright pressure I'd been getting from Mom, but manipulation nonetheless. Jessica had learned to accept my decision while still making me feel bad about it, still making me responsible for her emotional reaction to my boundaries. I was beginning to understand that this conflict was about more than just wedding decorations. It was about my family's fundamental inability to see me as separate from them, to accept that I had experiences and feelings that didn't belong to them. They loved me, But they loved me as an extension of themselves, rather than as an individual with her own needs and boundaries. And that realization was going to change everything about how I dealt with them going forward. I wasn't just going to protect my medals. I was going to protect myself, my story, and my right to keep some things private, even from family, especially from family. 3 days after Jessica hung up on me, I discovered just how deep this family campaign was going to go. I was at work, helping a young Marine named Diego navigate his disability claim paperwork, when my phone started buzzing with notifications. Not calls or texts, but social media alerts. Someone had tagged me in multiple posts on Facebook. I ignored them at first, focusing on Diego's case. He'd lost his left leg to an IED in Syria and was struggling with the VA's bureaucracy, trying to get the prosthetic he needed to walk again. His frustration was palpable as we went through form after form, each one asking him to relive his injury in clinical detail. "They want me to prove I'm disabled," he said, gesturing at his empty pant leg. "Like this isn't proof enough." "The system is broken," I told him. "But we'll get through it together. You've survived worse than government paperwork." He laughed. But it was hollow. "Sometimes I wonder if I have. At least in Syria, I knew who the enemy was." After Diego left, I finally looked at my phone. The notifications were from my cousin Tyler, Jessica's closest friend in the family. He'd posted several photos from past family gatherings, all featuring me in uniform during my leave periods. The captions made my stomach turn. "So proud of my cousin Kaycee and her incredible service to our country. She's earned so many medals for her bravery and sacrifice. Can't wait to see them displayed at Jessica's wedding." Another post showed a photo of me at Christmas 2 years ago, standing next to the tree in my dress blues. Our family hero. Jessica is so lucky to have a sister who's willing to share her military honors at the wedding. What a beautiful way to celebrate love and service. The comments were already piling up from extended family members and family friends. "She looks so proud in her uniform. What an honor to have a veteran in the family. Can't wait to see those medals at the wedding." My hands were shaking as I read through them. Tyler had made it sound like I'd already agreed to lend my medals, like the display was a done deal. Worse, he'd made it public, creating social pressure from people who had no idea what the real situation was. I called him immediately, my voice tight with anger. "Tyler, what the hell are you doing?" "Hey, cuz, just getting everyone excited about Jessica's wedding. It's going to be so amazing to have your medals there. Mom always said you were the pride of the family." I never agreed to that. I told Jessica no, and I meant it. "Oh, come on. You're not really going to leave Jessica hanging, are you? It's her wedding, Kaycee. Her one special day. And you're going to ruin it over some old medals that are just collecting dust?" Old medals collecting dust. The same dismissive language my mother and sister had used, now coming from Tyler, who'd never served a day in his life. "Those aren't old medals, Tyler. They're my medals, and they're not collecting dust. They're in my home where they belong. Look, I get that you're attached to them or whatever, but family comes first, right? Jessica has always been there for you. Remember when you were deployed and she organized those care packages? Remember how she kept everyone updated on your missions?" I did remember. Jessica had been supportive during my deployments, sending packages and keeping the family informed. But that support had come with expectations I was only now beginning to understand. She'd been investing in me, building credit she planned to cash in later. Supporting me during my deployments doesn't give her ownership of my service. Nobody's talking about ownership. We're talking about sharing, about letting the family be proud of what you've accomplished. The family can be proud without putting my medals on display. Tyler, I need you to take those posts down. Now. I can't do that. People are already commenting, already excited. If I take them down now, it'll look weird. Besides, Aunt Linda asked me to post them. She wanted everyone to know how honored the family is to have you. Aunt Linda, my mother, she'd orchestrated this, used Tyler to create public pressure because her private guilt trips weren't working. My mother asked you to post about my medals without asking me first? She said you were being modest about it. She wanted to make sure everyone knew what a hero you are. And did she tell you that I specifically said no to displaying them at the wedding? Silence on the other end of the line, then Tyler's voice, smaller and less confident. She said you were still thinking about it. She lied to you. I told her no 3 times. I told Jessica no twice. And now you've put me in a position where I have to disappoint a bunch of people who think I already agreed to something I never agreed to. Shit, Kaycee. I didn't know. I thought you were on board. Well, I'm not. And now you need to figure out how to clean this up. I don't know how to do that without making everyone look bad. Everyone already looks bad, Tyler. Now they just need to decide if they want to look bad and dishonest or bad and apologetic. I hung up and stared at my phone, watching the comments continue to pile up on Tyler's posts. Friends of the family were tagging their own friends, sharing stories about their military relatives, turning my private struggle into a public celebration I'd never wanted. That evening, I called my dad. Of all my family members, he'd been the quietest during this whole ordeal. He'd sent one text asking me to call home, but he hadn't joined the chorus of pressure and manipulation. I was hoping he might be the voice of reason. Dad, we need to talk. I figured you'd call eventually. Your mother's been beside herself about this whole wedding thing. What do you know about what Tyler posted on Facebook? A long pause. I saw the posts. Your mother showed them to me. Did you know she asked him to post them? Another pause, longer this time. I suspected. And you didn't stop her? Kaycee, you know how your mother gets when she's upset. She thinks she's helping, thinks she's protecting the family. I don't always agree with her methods, but her heart's in the right place. Her heart might be in the right place, but her actions are wrong. She lied to Tyler, made him think I'd agreed to something I specifically refused. Now there are dozens of people who think I'm displaying my medals at Jessica's wedding. Are you? Displaying them, I mean? No, Dad, I'm not. I told Mom no, I told Jessica no, and now I'm telling you no. Those medals are mine, they represent experiences that are too personal to put on display, and I'm keeping them private. I understand that, I do. But I also understand that your mother and sister love you and want to celebrate you. Maybe there's a compromise here. What kind of compromise? Maybe you could lend them one medal instead of all of them. Or maybe you could write something for Jessica to read at the wedding, something about your service, a way to honor what you've done without having to display the actual medals. I could hear the hope in his voice, the desire to fix things and make everyone happy. Dad had always been the peacemaker in our family, the one who tried to smooth over conflicts and find middle ground. But some things couldn't be compromised. Dad, there's no compromise here. Either my medals are mine to control, or they're family property. Either my service belongs to me, or it belongs to everyone. I can't give them half ownership of something that cost me so much. I'm not asking you to give them ownership. I'm asking you to consider that maybe they love you enough to want to share in your accomplishments. If they loved me enough, they'd respect my boundaries without asking for compromises. Dad was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was tired. You're not the same person who left for basic training, Kaycee. You've changed. You're harder now, more suspicious. Your family is trying to connect with you, but you're making it difficult. Harder, more suspicious, making it difficult. The same language my family had always used when I didn't conform to their expectations. When I'd enlisted instead of going to college, I was being difficult. When I'd re-enlisted instead of coming home, I was being stubborn. And now, When I wanted to keep my private experiences private, I was being hard and suspicious. I am different, Dad. I've seen things and done things that changed me. That's what happens when you serve in combat. And part of being different is needing different kinds of support than I used to need. What kind of support do you need? I need you to respect my boundaries without asking me to justify them. I need you to understand that some parts of my life are too private to share, even with family. I need you to love me enough to let me keep some things to myself. We do love you. That's why this is so hard. We want to be part of your life, but you keep pushing us away. I'm not pushing you away. I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference. Maybe there is, but from where I'm sitting, it looks the same. We talked for another 20 minutes, but we didn't resolve anything. Dad wanted me to compromise, to find a way to give my family what they wanted while still protecting what I needed to protect. But he didn't understand that this wasn't about medals or wedding displays. This was about my right to control my own story, to decide what parts of my life were public and what parts were private. After we hung up, I sat in my living room staring at the shadow box on the wall. The medals looked different now somehow. They'd gone from being private symbols of my service to being the center of a family crisis. My relatives were fighting over them like they were inheritance, like they were family heirlooms instead of personal military awards. I thought about Chris, about the promise I'd made to him to live a good life for both of us. Was this a good life? Fighting with my family over my right to keep my own experiences private? Feeling like I had to choose between my boundaries and their love. My phone buzzed with a Facebook notification. Someone else had commented on Tyler's post. Someone I didn't recognize. My brother served in Afghanistan too. I'm so grateful for people like your cousin who are willing to share their stories and inspire others. Share their stories. That's what my family was asking me to do, without understanding that some stories were too painful to share. They wanted the inspiring version of my service, the version that made them feel proud and patriotic. They didn't want the version that included nightmares and survivor's guilt and the weight of decisions that had kept some people alive and gotten others killed. That night, I had the dream again. I was back in Afghanistan, back in that convoy, with Chris. But this time, instead of stepping on the IED himself, he was trying to warn me about it. He was shouting my name, telling me to stop, but I couldn't hear him over the noise of the vehicles. I kept walking toward the device, and he kept trying to save me, and I woke up just as the explosion went off. I sat up in bed, sweating and shaking. It was 3:17 a.m., and I knew I wouldn't be able to get back to sleep. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen table, thinking about the dream and what it might mean. In real life, Chris had been the one to step on the IED. In the dream, he was trying to protect me from making the same mistake. Maybe that's what he was trying to tell me now. Maybe he was trying to warn me that giving in to my family's pressure would be its own kind of explosion, its own kind of destruction. Maybe keeping my medals private wasn't about being selfish or difficult. Maybe it was about protecting something that was too important to risk. The next morning, I woke up to find that Tyler's Facebook posts had been shared dozens of times. Friends of friends were commenting, strangers were offering their own military stories, and the whole thing had taken on a life of its own. My private struggle with my family had become a public celebration of military service, with me as the reluctant centerpiece. I called Tyler again, this time with my recording app running. Tyler, this has gotten out of hand. I need you to take those posts down. I can't, Kaycee. Too many people have shared them. If I delete them now, it'll just look like I'm hiding something. You are hiding something. You're hiding the fact that you posted about my medals without my permission. I thought I had your permission. Mom lied to you. She told you I was still thinking about it because she knew if she told you I'd said no, you wouldn't have posted anything. Look, I'm sorry about the miscommunication, but the posts are out there now and people are excited. maybe this is a sign that you should reconsider. Maybe seeing how proud everyone is will help you understand why this matters to Jessica. This isn't about Jessica anymore, Tyler. This is about my family using social media to pressure me into doing something I don't want to do. Nobody's pressuring you. We're just showing support. You're showing support for something I never agreed to. You're creating expectations that I can't meet without betraying my own boundaries. Your boundaries are hurting people, Kaycee. Your family, your friends, people who care about you. Is that really what you want? There it was again. The suggestion that my boundaries were the problem, that my need for privacy was causing harm to others. Tyler was making my refusal to share my medals into a selfish act that was hurting everyone who loved me. My boundaries aren't hurting anyone. They're protecting me. And if my family really loved me, they'd want me to be protected. We do want you to be protected, but we also want you to be part of the family. And right now, you're choosing your medals over your relationships. I'm not choosing my medals over anything. I'm choosing my right to privacy over other people's expectations. Same thing. No, it's not. We argued for another 10 minutes, but neither of us changed our position. Tyler thought I was being selfish and stubborn. I thought he was being manipulative and disrespectful. By the time we hung up, it was clear that this conflict was about more than just wedding decorations. It was about fundamental differences in how we understood family, boundaries, and the right to privacy. That afternoon, I got a call from Aunt Sarah. She was my mother's older sister, and she'd always been the family diplomat, the one who tried to mediate conflicts and keep everyone happy. Kaycee, honey, I hope you don't mind me calling. I've been following all this drama about Jessica's wedding, and I wanted to talk to you about it. What's your take on it, Aunt Sarah? Well, I think everyone means well, but maybe things have gotten a little out of hand. Your mother is worried about you, Jessica is stressed about her wedding, and you're feeling pressured. Nobody's happy. I'd be happy if everyone would just respect my decision and move on. I understand that, and I think your decision is reasonable. Those medals are yours, and you have every right to keep them private. But I also think there might be ways to support Jessica without compromising your boundaries. Like what? Like maybe you could help her create a different kind of display, something that honors military service in general, without using your specific medals. Or maybe you could give a toast at the wedding, something that acknowledges your service without going into details you're not comfortable sharing. I appreciated that Aunt Sarah was trying to find a middle ground, but her suggestions still missed the point. This wasn't about finding alternative ways to honor my service. This was about my family's inability to accept that I had experiences they weren't entitled to share. Aunt Sarah, I appreciate you trying to help, but the problem isn't that I'm not willing to compromise. The problem is that my family thinks they have a right to my service, to my experiences, to my medals. They think loving me gives them ownership of parts of my life that belong only to me. I don't think they see it that way, honey. I think they see it as wanting to be proud of you, wanting to celebrate what you've accomplished. They can be proud of me without putting my trauma on display. They can celebrate my service without turning it into a wedding decoration. Is that really what you think this is about? Your trauma? Part of it, yes. Those medals represent some of the worst moments of my life. They're connected to friends I lost, decisions I had to make, experiences that still give me nightmares. And my family wants to put all of that on a table next to the wedding cake. Aunt Sarah was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was gentler. I didn't realize it was that difficult for you. Your mother talks about your service, like it was something heroic and inspiring. She doesn't talk about the hard parts, because she doesn't want to know about the hard parts. She wants the sanitized version, the version that makes her feel proud and patriotic. She doesn't want to hear about the parts that are complicated or painful. Maybe that's because she loves you and doesn't want to think about you suffering. Maybe. But love without understanding isn't really love. It's just projection. She loves the version of me that makes her feel good about herself. She doesn't love the version of me that's been changed by difficult experiences. That's a hard thing to say about your own mother. It's a hard thing to realize about your own mother. We talked for another hour, and by the end of the conversation, I felt like Aunt Sarah understood my position better. She didn't agree with everything I was saying, but she could see why I was struggling with my family's expectations. She promised to talk to my mother, to try to help her understand my perspective. But even as I appreciated Aunt Sarah's support, I knew that the fundamental problem remained. My family saw my service as a family accomplishment, my medals as family property, my experiences as family stories. They couldn't understand why I needed to keep some things private because they didn't see me as separate from them. That evening, I decided to take a different approach. Instead of just defending my position, I was going to show my family exactly what they were asking for. I was going to make them confront the reality of what my medals represented. I sat down at my computer and began typing a letter. Not an angry letter or a defensive letter, but an honest one. A letter that explained exactly what each of my medals meant, exactly what I'd done to earn them, exactly what they represented in terms of loss and trauma and responsibility. I wrote about the day I'd earned my Purple Heart, about holding Chris's hand while he died, about the shrapnel that had torn through my shoulder and left me with scars that still ached. I wrote about the firefight that had earned me my Bronze Star, about the decisions I'd made that had kept some soldiers alive and hadn't been enough to save others. I wrote about the nightmares, the survivor's guilt, the weight of command responsibility that I carried every day. I wrote about what it felt like to come home to a family that wanted to celebrate my service without understanding what it had cost me. I wrote about the difference between being proud of someone and wanting to own their experiences. I wrote about the loneliness of carrying memories that were too dark to share, too personal to explain. When I finished, the letter was 8 pages long. It was raw and honest and painful, full of details I'd never shared with anyone. It was the complete story of my service, not just the heroic parts that made people feel good, but the complicated parts that made me who I was. I read it over 3 times, then saved it to my computer. I wasn't going to send it to my family. Not yet. But I was going to keep it, as a reminder of what they were really asking for when they wanted to put my medals on display. They weren't just asking for decorations. They were asking for pieces of my soul. The next morning, I woke up to a text from Jessica. Kaycee, I know things have been tense between us, but I want you to know that I've been thinking about what you said. I'm starting to understand why this is hard for you. Can we talk? I called her back, cautiously hopeful that maybe she was finally ready to hear what I'd been trying to tell her. Jessica, I got your text. What's changed? I talked to David. About everything. About the medals, about your service, about why you might not want to share them. He helped me see some things I hadn't considered before. Like what? Like the fact that maybe I don't understand what your service really means to you. Maybe I've been thinking about it like it was just a job you did, instead of something that changed who you are. It did change who I am, in ways that are hard to explain. I'm starting to realize that, and I'm also starting to realize that maybe I've been selfish about this. Maybe I've been so focused on what I want for my wedding that I haven't been thinking about what you need. I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Jessica was finally understanding what I'd been trying to tell her. I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot to me. I want to find a way to honor you at the wedding without making you uncomfortable, but I also want to understand why this is so important to you. Can you help me understand? I thought about the letter I'd written the night before, about all the details I'd never shared with anyone. Jessica was asking me to help her understand, but understanding would require sharing things that were too private, too painful, too personal. Jessica, Some things are too difficult to explain. Some experiences are too private to share, even with people we love. But I'm your sister. We're supposed to be able to talk about anything. We can talk about most things, but not everything. Some things are too personal, even for sisters. I don't understand how anything could be too personal for sisters. And there it was, the fundamental difference between us. Jessica believed that being sisters meant having access to all parts of each other's lives. I believed that being sisters meant respecting each other's right to privacy. Jessica, when you were in college, did you tell me about every relationship you had? Every mistake you made? Every private moment you experienced? That's different. Those were just college things. And my service was just military things. But they're my military things, just like your college experiences were your college experiences. Being sisters doesn't mean we own each other's stories. But your service is something to be proud of. My college mistakes aren't. Pride doesn't. Eliminate the right to privacy. I can be proud of my service and still want to keep parts of it to myself. We talked for another hour, and while Jessica seemed more understanding than she had been, I could tell she still didn't fully grasp what I was trying to tell her. She was willing to accept my decision, but she didn't understand why I was making it. She was respecting my boundaries, but she was doing it reluctantly, as a favor to me rather than because she believed I had the right to set them. It was progress, but it wasn't resolution, and I was beginning to realize that resolution might not be possible. My family and I had fundamentally different ideas about privacy, boundaries, and the nature of family relationships. They saw love as ownership, as the right to access all parts of each other's lives. I saw love as respect, as the willingness to accept that some parts of people remained private and separate. This conflict wasn't just about medals or wedding displays. It was about who I was allowed to be within my family, whether I was allowed to have experiences that belonged only to me, whether I was allowed to change and grow in ways that made me different from who I used to be. And for the first time, I was beginning to understand that the answer to those questions might be no. My family might not be able to love the person I'd become, the person who needed boundaries and privacy, and the right to keep some things sacred. They might only be able to love the version of me that existed for their benefit, the version that shared everything and kept nothing private. That realization was more painful than any combat wound I'd ever received. But it was also liberating. Because for the first time since this whole ordeal began, I was starting to understand that my family's inability to respect my boundaries wasn't my fault. It wasn't something I could fix by compromising or explaining better or finding the right words. It was something I was going to have to learn to live with. And that knowledge was going to change everything about how I dealt with them going forward. 2 weeks before Jessica's wedding, I made a decision that would change everything. I was going to tell my family the complete truth about what my medals really meant, about what I'd experienced to earn them, about why they were too sacred to put on display at a wedding reception. But I wasn't going to do it gently or diplomatically. I was going to force them to confront the reality they'd been avoiding. The final straw came when I arrived at my parents' house for what I thought was a casual family dinner and walked into what was clearly an intervention. Mom, Dad, Jessica, Tyler, Aunt Sarah, and even Uncle Mark were all sitting in the living room, waiting for me with serious expressions and coordinated talking points. "Kaycee, we need to have a family meeting," Mom announced before I'd even taken off my jacket. "This situation with the medals has gone on long enough, and we need to resolve it as a family." I looked around the room at their faces, all turned toward me with varying degrees of concern, frustration, and determination. They'd planned this ambush carefully, probably spent hours discussing strategy and assigning roles. Jessica looked nervous but resolved. Dad looked uncomfortable but committed to whatever plan they'd hatched. Tyler avoided my eyes entirely. "What kind of resolution did you have in mind?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. We want you to understand how important this is to Jessica, Aunt Sarah said gently. We want you to see that your family loves you and wants to celebrate you, not hurt you. And we want you to understand that sometimes love means making sacrifices for the people who matter most to us, Uncle Mark added. He'd served briefly in the National Guard decades ago, and apparently thought that gave him insight into my situation. I sat down slowly, realizing that this wasn't going to be a conversation. This was going to be a coordinated pressure campaign designed to wear down my resistance and force me to give them what they wanted. So this is how we're doing this now? Ambushing me in my parents' living room? Nobody's ambushing you, sweetheart, Mom said. We're trying to help you understand something important. What's that? That your refusal to share your medals is hurting people you love, Jessica said, her voice shaky but determined. That your need to keep everything private is damaging your relationships with your family. My medals aren't everything, Jessica. They're specific awards that represent specific experiences that were difficult and personal. But they're also symbols of something beautiful, Aunt Sarah interjected. They represent your service to your country, your sacrifice for freedom, your willingness to put others before yourself. Those are things worth celebrating. They represent moments when people died, I said flatly. They represent decisions I had to make that still keep me awake at night. They represent trauma that I'm still processing 3 years later. The room went quiet. My family wasn't used to hearing me talk about the difficult parts of my service. They preferred the sanitized version, the one that made them feel proud and patriotic without having to confront the reality of what war actually looked like. We know your service was difficult, Dad said carefully, but that doesn't mean it wasn't also meaningful. That doesn't mean it's not worth honoring. I'm not saying it's not worth honoring. I'm saying it's not worth putting on display at a wedding reception. But why? Jessica's voice was rising, and I could see tears starting to form in her eyes. Why can't you help me make my wedding special? Why can't you do this one thing for me? This one thing. Like lending my medals was equivalent to helping her address wedding invitations or choosing flowers. Like my Purple Heart was just another wedding favor to be distributed for the entertainment of guests. Because it's not one thing, Jessica. It's everything. It's my entire relationship with my service, my trauma, my memories of friends who didn't come home. You're asking me to turn all of that into a decoration. That's not what we're asking, Uncle Mark said firmly. We're asking you to share something meaningful with people who love you. The people who love me should understand why I need to keep some things private. The people who love you should trust that your family has your best interests at heart, Mom replied. We're not trying to hurt you, Kaycee. We're trying to include you, to make you part of something beautiful. By forcing me to do something I've repeatedly said I don't want to do. By helping you see past your own fear and isolation, Tyler said, speaking up for the first time since I'd arrived. You've been different since you came back, Kaycee. Closed off, suspicious. Maybe sharing these medals would help you reconnect with your family. Closed off, suspicious. The same words Dad had used on the phone, now coming from Tyler, who'd never seen combat, never lost friends, never had to make life and death decisions in a foreign country. Maybe I'm closed off because my family thinks they own my experiences. Maybe I'm suspicious because my family lies to me and manipulates me when I don't give them what they want. Nobody's lying to you, Mom said sharply. We're being honest about how your behavior is affecting this family. Tyler posted on Facebook about my medals without my permission because you told him I was still thinking about lending them. That was a lie. That was a misunderstanding. That was a manipulation. You used Tyler to create public pressure because your private guilt trips weren't working. The room erupted in defensive voices, everyone talking at once, everyone explaining why their actions were justified and my reactions were unreasonable. Jessica was crying now, talking about how her own sister was ruining her wedding. Mom was lecturing me about family loyalty and ungrateful children. Tyler was apologizing but also defending his Facebook posts as innocent family pride. I sat in the middle of it all, listening to them argue about me as if I wasn't there, and I made my decision. If they wanted to know what my medals really meant, I was going to tell them. If they thought my service was something to be celebrated and displayed, they were going to learn exactly what they were asking to put on exhibition. "Stop," I said quietly. The room didn't quiet down, so I said it louder. "Stop." Everyone turned to look at me, surprised by the command tone in my voice. It was the voice I'd used in Afghanistan when I needed my soldiers to listen immediately, without question. "You want to know what my medals represent? You want to understand why I won't let you put them on display at Jessica's wedding? Fine. I'll tell you exactly what each one means, exactly what I did to earn them, exactly what you're asking me to turn into table decorations." I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, setting it on the coffee table in front of me. "I'm recording this conversation because I want there to be no misunderstanding about what you're asking for." "Kaycee, you don't need to," Dad started. "Yes, I do. You've spent weeks telling me that I'm being selfish and difficult for wanting to keep my medals private. Now you're going to learn exactly what you're asking me to share." I looked around the room, making eye contact with each family member. They were all staring at me with a mixture of concern and curiosity, probably expecting me to tell them some inspiring war stories that would help them understand my heroism. Let's start with my Purple Heart, the medal you want to put next to the wedding cake and flowers. I earned that medal on March 15th, 2021, when my best friend Chris Morrison stepped on an improvised explosive device during a patrol outside Kandahar. I was walking 10 feet behind him when it happened. Jessica's eyes widened, and I could see her starting to understand that this wasn't going to be the inspiring story she'd expected. The explosion was so loud it left my ears ringing for days. When the dust settled, I could see Chris lying maybe 20 feet away. His legs were gone, and there was blood everywhere. Shrapnel from the same device that killed him had torn through my shoulder and left leg, but I was conscious and mobile. Mom's face had gone pale, and she was shaking her head slightly, as if she could will me to stop talking. I dragged myself over to where Chris was lying and tried to stop the bleeding. He was conscious for about 2 minutes after I got to him, long enough to tell me to make sure his mother knew he wasn't scared when he died, long enough to make me promise that I'd live a good life for both of us. He died holding my hand, and I stayed with his body until the medevac helicopter arrived. The room was completely silent now. Tyler was staring at his hands, and Aunt Sarah had tears streaming down her face. The medic said the shrapnel that wounded me came from the same IED that killed Chris. Same blast, same moment, but I lived and he didn't because of pure chance. The Purple Heart they gave me has Chris's blood on it, metaphorically if not literally. Every time I look at it, I remember holding his hand while he died. I remember the promise I made to him. I remember that I survived something that killed my best friend. Jessica was crying openly now, but I wasn't finished. "Now let's talk about my Bronze Star, the medal you want to display so people can see what a hero I am." I earned that medal 6 weeks after Chris died, during a firefight with Taliban insurgents who had ambushed our convoy. We had wounded soldiers trapped in a disabled vehicle, and someone had to coordinate their evacuation under heavy fire. I looked directly at Uncle Mark, who had served briefly in peacetime and thought he understood military service. I had to decide which soldiers to send to recover the wounded, knowing that some of them might not come back. I had to choose which men to risk to save others. 3 of my soldiers were wounded during that evacuation, and one of them, a kid named Rodriguez, lost his right arm to a grenade blast. Uncle Mark's expression had changed from confident understanding to uncomfortable realization. The citation for my Bronze Star talks about valor and heroism, but all I remember is the weight of those decisions, the responsibility for other people's lives, the knowledge that my choices determined who went home whole and who went home broken. Rodriguez still sends me Christmas cards, and he always signs them with his left hand because that's the only one he has. I paused, looking around the room at their faces. The inspiration and pride they'd expected to feel were nowhere to be seen. Instead, they looked shocked, uncomfortable, maybe even a little horrified. "These are the medals you want to put on display at your wedding, Jessica. These are the experiences you want to turn into decorations for your reception. Chris's death. Rodriguez's amputation. The weight of command decisions that changed people's lives forever. Is that really what you want your wedding guests to think about while they're eating cake and dancing?" Jessica was sobbing now, and Mom looked like she might be sick. Dad was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something between admiration and horror. "I don't understand why you never told us any of this before," Aunt Sarah said quietly. "Because it's not your story to know. Because some experiences are too private, too personal, too sacred to share with people who weren't there. Because I was trying to protect you from having to carry the weight of what I've seen and done." "But we're your family," Mom said weakly. "We should know what you've been through." "Why? So you can feel guilty about it? So you can worry about me? So you can try to fix something that can't be fixed? I didn't tell you because there's nothing you can do with this information except carry it as a burden." "We could support you," Jessica said through her tears. "We could help you process it. You could support me by respecting my boundaries. You could help me by understanding that some things are too important to share, even with people I love." The room was quiet for a long moment. Everyone was processing what I'd told them, trying to reconcile the inspiring military service they'd imagined with the traumatic reality I'd just described. "I had no idea," Tyler said finally. "I'm sorry, Kaycee. I never would have posted those things on Facebook if I'd known." "But that's exactly the point, Tyler. You posted about my service without knowing what it meant. You turned my medals into social media content without understanding what they represented. You assumed that military service was something to be celebrated and displayed without considering that it might be something private and personal." "We all did that," Dad admitted. "We all assumed that your medals were something to be proud of, something to show off. They are something to be proud of, but they're also something to be protected. They're not just awards. They're reminders of experiences that changed who I am. They're connected to people who didn't come home, to decisions that still keep me awake at night, to responsibilities that I'll carry for the rest of my life." I looked at Jessica, who was still crying but seemed to be listening more carefully now. "This is why I can't lend you my medals for your wedding. Not because I'm selfish or difficult or closed off, but because they represent things that are too sacred to put on display. They belong in my home, where I can honor them privately, where I can remember Chris and Rodriguez and all the others without having to perform that remembrance for an audience." "I understand now," Jessica said quietly. "I'm sorry, Kaycee. I didn't know. I thought they were just awards, just recognition for good work. I didn't understand that they were connected to loss and trauma. And that's okay. You weren't supposed to understand. That's why I was trying to keep them private." "But why didn't you just tell us this from the beginning?" Mom asked. "If we'd known what the medals meant to you, we never would have pushed so hard." "Because I shouldn't have to share my trauma to justify my boundaries. Because no should be a complete sentence, especially when it comes from someone you love. Because respecting my privacy shouldn't require understanding all the details of why I need privacy." I picked up my phone and stopped the recording, then looked around the room at my family members. I've just shared more about my military service with you than I've shared with anyone, including my therapist. I've told you things that I've never said out loud before, things that are painful and private and personal. I've done that not because you had a right to know, but because it seemed to be the only way to make you understand why your requests were inappropriate. "We appreciate you sharing that with us," Aunt Sarah said. "It helps us understand. But it also proves my point. I should have been able to keep those experiences private. I should have been able to say no to lending my medals without having to justify that decision with details about combat trauma. The fact that you needed to hear about Chris's death and Rodriguez's amputation to respect my boundaries shows that you never really respected me as an individual with the right to privacy. The room was quiet again, and I could see my family members processing not just what I'd told them about my service, but what I was saying about their treatment of me. "What do we do now?" Jessica asked. "How do we fix this?" "You start by accepting that I have experiences you're not entitled to know about. You start by respecting my boundaries without requiring explanations. You start by understanding that love doesn't give you ownership of another person's life or experiences." "And the wedding?" she asked quietly. "I'll be there to support you and celebrate with you, but my medals will stay home, where they belong. And if anyone asks why they're not on display, you can tell them that some things are too important to share." Jessica nodded, wiping tears from her eyes. "I can do that. I'm sorry, Kaycee. I'm sorry for pushing so hard, for not listening when you said no the first time." "I'm sorry too," Mom said. "I thought I was protecting the family's interests, but I was really just trying to control something that wasn't mine to control." One by one, my family members apologized. Not just for pushing about the medals, but for not respecting my boundaries, for assuming they had the right to know about my experiences, for trying to use social pressure and manipulation to get what they wanted. But even as they apologized, I could see that some of them still didn't fully understand. They were sorry for hurting me, but they weren't necessarily convinced that I had the right to keep things private from family. They were accepting my decision about the medals, but they were doing it reluctantly, as a concession to my trauma rather than as recognition of my autonomy. It was progress, but it wasn't resolution. And I was beginning to understand that full resolution might not be possible. My family and I had fundamentally different ideas about privacy, boundaries, and what family members owed each other. As I drove home that night, I felt a mixture of relief and sadness. Relief that the pressure about the medals had finally ended, that my family now understood why their requests had been inappropriate. Sadness that it had taken sharing my deepest trauma to get them to respect a simple no. I thought about Chris, about the promise I'd made to him to live a good life for both of us. Standing up for my boundaries, protecting my right to privacy, keeping some experiences sacred. Maybe that was part of living a good life. Maybe honoring his memory meant refusing to let other people, even family members, turn his death into a public display. When I got home, I sat in front of the shadow box containing my medals and spoke to Chris the way I sometimes did when I was struggling with something difficult. "I told them about you today," I said quietly. "I told them about the day you died, about the promise I made to you. I hope that was okay. I hope you understand why I had to do it." The medals gleamed softly in the lamplight, and for a moment, I could almost hear Chris's voice, telling me that he understood, that he was proud of me for protecting something sacred, that some promises were worth keeping no matter how difficult they became. I was finally at peace with my decision. My medals would stay private, my experiences would remain my own, and my family would have to learn to love me without owning every part of my story. It wasn't the resolution anyone had expected, but it was the one that honored both my service and my right to control my own narrative. And for the first time since this whole ordeal began, that felt like enough. Jessica's wedding day arrived 3 weeks later, and I kept my promise. I was there in my navy blue dress, sitting in the third row next to my parents, watching my sister marry the man she loved. The ceremony was beautiful, held in a garden venue with white roses and string lights creating a perfect backdrop for their vows. Jessica looked radiant in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, and David couldn't stop smiling as he watched her walk down the aisle. There was no military display table at the reception, No shadow box with medals gleaming under spotlights. No explanation needed about heroism or sacrifice. Instead, Jessica had created something entirely different. Something that honored service without exploiting it. Near the guest book table sat a simple wooden sign that read, "In honor of all who serve," with a small American flag beside it. Elegant, respectful, and completely separate from my personal story. During her maid of honor speech, Jessica's best friend mentioned how grateful they all were for the freedoms that allowed them to celebrate love openly, and how they honored all service members past and present. It was a beautiful sentiment that acknowledged military sacrifice without turning anyone's specific trauma into entertainment. I watched my family throughout the evening, noting the subtle changes in how they interacted with me. Mom asked about my work at the VA hospital instead of pushing me to share war stories. Dad talked about his own job challenges without comparing them to combat stress. Tyler apologized again for the Facebook posts and deleted them entirely, admitting he'd learned something important about consent and boundaries. But the most significant change was in Jessica herself. During the father-daughter dance, she caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "Thank you." Not thank you for the medals, but thank you for helping her understand something deeper about love and respect. Later, as the reception wound down and guests began filtering out into the warm spring evening, Jessica found me at our family table where I was finishing the last of my wedding cake. "Kaycee, can we talk for a minute?" We walked to a quiet corner of the garden, away from the remaining dancers and the cleanup crew beginning to stack chairs. The string lights cast a soft glow over everything, and I could hear laughter from the last few couples on the dance floor. "I wanted to thank you," Jessica said. "Not just for being here tonight, but for everything that happened leading up to this. You don't need to thank me for setting boundaries. Yes, I do. Because you taught me something I needed to learn." She paused, looking down at her wedding ring, still new and unfamiliar on her finger. "I thought love meant having access to everything about the people you care about. I thought being family meant never having to respect privacy or boundaries. And now? Now I understand that real love means respecting the parts of people they need to keep sacred. It means trusting that someone can love you completely while still maintaining parts of themselves that are private." I nodded, feeling something tight in my chest finally beginning to loosen. That's exactly right. David and I talked about it during our honeymoon planning. We realized that we both have experiences and feelings that we keep private, not because we don't trust each other, but because some things are too personal to share even with the person you love most. That's healthy, Jessica. That's what makes relationships sustainable long-term. I know that now, and I'm sorry it took me so long to understand. She reached into her small bridal purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I wrote you something. It's not an apology exactly, because I've already apologized. It's more like a promise." I unfolded the paper and read her handwritten note by the light of the string lights above us. It was short, but powerful. "Kaycee, I promise to love you without trying to own your story. I promise to respect your boundaries without requiring explanations. I promise to support your healing without demanding access to your wounds. You are my sister, not my property, and your service belongs to you alone. Thank you for teaching me the difference between loving someone and consuming them. Jessica." I folded the note carefully and put it in my purse. This means everything to me. I hope we can have a different kind of relationship going forward. One based on respect instead of expectation. I'd like that very much. We hugged then, a real hug without the weight of unresolved conflict between us. Jessica felt different, in my arms, more solid somehow, like she'd grown into herself during these past few weeks of difficult conversations and painful realizations. The drive home that night was peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in months. No family drama waiting for me. No pressure to be someone I wasn't. No expectation that I would sacrifice my boundaries for other people's comfort. just the quiet satisfaction of having stood firm in my convictions while still maintaining the relationships that mattered to me. When I got to my apartment, I sat in front of my shadow box for a few minutes, looking at the medals that had become the center of so much family turmoil. They looked the same as always, but they felt different now. They felt protected in a way they hadn't before, secure in their proper place as private symbols of experiences that belonged only to me. I thought about Chris, about the promise I'd made to him to live a good life for both of us. Standing up for my boundaries, protecting my right to keep some experiences sacred, refusing to let others turn my service into their entertainment. This felt like honoring that promise. This felt like living with integrity. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, my old squad leader who'd become a close friend in the years since we'd both gotten out of the military. Saw Jessica's wedding photos on Facebook. Looked beautiful. How did the family drama turn out? I typed back, better than expected. They finally understood that some things are too important to share. Good for you. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't, but it was worth it. Always is, when you're protecting something sacred. Sacred. That was exactly the word I'd been looking for all along. My medals weren't just awards or symbols or sources of pride. They were sacred objects, connected to experiences that had transformed me, to people who'd trusted me with their lives, to moments of loss and responsibility that could never be shared casually. Over the following weeks, I noticed other changes in my family dynamics. Mom stopped asking intrusive questions about my therapy appointments and started asking about my weekend plans instead. Dad began sharing stories about his own work challenges without expecting me to top them with combat anecdotes. Even extended family members seemed to understand that military service wasn't a topic for casual conversation or party entertainment. The most surprising change came from Uncle Mark, who called me a month after the wedding with an unexpected confession. Kaycee, I owe you an apology, a bigger one than I gave you at your parents' house. What do you mean? I've been thinking about what you said, about how we were treating your service like it belonged to the family, and I realized I've been doing something similar with my own brief time in the National Guard. I listened as Uncle Mark explained how he'd been inflating his minimal military experience for years, telling stories about training exercises like they were combat missions, accepting thanks for his service when he'd never deployed or faced danger. I was living vicariously through real veterans like you, claiming credit for sacrifices I never made. When you stood up for your right to keep your experiences private, it made me realize how wrong I'd been to treat military service like public property. I appreciate you telling me that. I wanted you to know that what you did took real courage, not just your service overseas, but standing up to your family when we were all pressuring you. You showed me what integrity looks like. These conversations were happening throughout my extended family as people began to examine their own assumptions about military service, family boundaries, and the difference between support and ownership. It was like dropping a stone into still water, watching the ripples spread outward in unexpected directions. 3 months after Jessica's wedding, I received a letter that changed everything. It was from Chris's mother, Mrs. Morrison, whom I'd stayed in touch with since his funeral, but hadn't spoken to in several months. Dear Kaycee, the letter began, I hope this finds you well. I wanted you to know that Chris's father and I have been talking about something important and we'd like your input. She went on to explain that they were planning a small memorial scholarship in Chris's name for students interested in military service or education. They were wondering if I would be willing to serve on the selection committee, helping to choose recipients who embodied the same qualities Chris had shown during his life and service. We know this might be difficult for you, given your relationship with Chris and the circumstances of his death. But we also know that he trusted you, more than anyone, and we believe he would want you to be part of honoring his memory in this way. I read the letter 3 times, thinking about what it would mean to be involved in something that memorialized Chris publicly while still maintaining the privacy of our specific experiences together. This felt different from my family's request to display my medals. This was about honoring Chris's life and values, not exploiting the circumstances of his death. I called Mrs. Morrison that evening and accepted her invitation to join the scholarship committee. Over the following months, I found a way to honor Chris's memory that felt meaningful without being exploitative. I could talk about his character, his dedication to his fellow soldiers, his dreams of becoming a teacher, without having to share the specific details of how he died or what his final moments were like. It became a model for how I could engage with my military service publicly when I chose to, on my own terms, for purposes that felt worthy of the experiences they honored. I wasn't hiding my service or being ashamed of it. I was protecting its sacred aspects while sharing its meaningful ones. A year later, I ran into Tyler at a coffee shop near my apartment. He'd changed since the wedding, seemed more thoughtful, and less quick to make assumptions about other people's experiences. "Kaycee, how are you? I've been meaning to call you." We sat together for over an hour, talking about family, work, and the lessons we'd both learned from the medal controversy. Tyler had started volunteering with a local veterans organization, helping with practical needs like transportation to medical appointments and grocery shopping. "I realized I'd been treating military service like a spectator sport," he admitted. "Like something exciting to watch and talk about, instead of something that changes people in profound ways. Now I'm trying to actually help instead of just feeling patriotic. That's exactly the kind of support that matters. I learned that from you. When you stood up to all of us, you showed me the difference between supporting veterans and using them for emotional satisfaction." As we parted ways that afternoon, Tyler handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a simple wooden box with an engraved brass nameplate that read, "For things too sacred to share." "I thought you might like somewhere special to keep private. Letters or mementos," he explained. "Things that are important but not for public display." It was a perfect gift, showing that he truly understood what I'd been trying to protect. I used it to store Chris's letters, photos from deployments that were too personal to frame, and other military memorabilia that belonged in my private space rather than on public display. 2 years after Jessica's wedding, I made my own decision about how to honor my military service publicly. I started speaking at high school career fairs, not about the details of combat or the specifics of my deployments, but about the values that military service had taught me: responsibility, integrity, and the importance of protecting what's sacred. I never mentioned my specific medals or told war stories. Instead, I talked about leadership, about making difficult decisions, about the bonds formed between people who trust each other completely. I shared the lessons without exploiting the experiences, honored my service without betraying its private aspects. Students often asked about combat, about what it was like to be in danger, about whether I'd killed anyone. I learned to redirect these questions gently, but firmly. "Some experiences are too personal to share," I would tell them. "But I can tell you about the values that got me through difficult times, and those are things that might help you too, whatever challenges you face." It became my standard response to intrusive questions about my service, whether they came from students, coworkers, or casual acquaintances. Some experiences are too personal to share. Simple, clear, and unashamed. 3 years later, Jessica called me with news that brought our story full circle. "Kaycee, I'm pregnant. David and I are having a baby." "That's wonderful. Congratulations." "Thank you. And I wanted you to know that we've been talking about how to raise our child to understand boundaries and respect other people's privacy." "What do you mean?" "We want to teach them that loving someone doesn't mean owning their story. That family members are individuals with their own experiences and feelings, not extensions of each other. We want them to understand what you taught us about the difference between love and possession." It was one of the most meaningful compliments I'd ever received. Jessica and David were going to raise their child to understand the lessons we'd why. All learned through our difficult conflict about my medals. They were going to teach the next generation to respect boundaries, to honor privacy, to love people without trying to consume them. As I hung up the phone that day, I felt a deep sense of completion. The pain and conflict that had surrounded my family's request for my medals had ultimately led to healing and growth for all of us. We'd learned to love each other better, to respect each other more fully, to support each other without trying to own each other. My medals remained in their shadow box in my living room, honored privately, protected from public display, connected to experiences that belonged only to me. They were exactly where they should be, in the care of the person who'd earned them, surrounded by the sacred space they deserved. I thought about Chris one more time, about the promise I'd made to him to live a good life for both of us. Standing up for my boundaries, teaching my family about respect and privacy, learning to honor my service on my own terms. This felt like keeping that promise. This felt like living with integrity, protecting what was sacred, and loving others, without losing myself. Some experiences are too personal to share. Some things are too sacred for public display. Some boundaries are too important to compromise, even for family. I'd learned all of these lessons the hard way, but I'd learned them completely, and in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.